I was 4 months into my deployment in Kandahar when my marriage of 13 years ended with a PDF. No warning, no conversation. Just an email with the subject line, "Let's be adults about this." My name is Jake. I'm a 42-year-old staff sergeant with the 82nd Airborne. I've served 4 tours, 2 in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. I've spent more time in the desert than I have in my own living room. But nothing, no combat zone, no mission prepared me for the 3-sentence email that effectively torched the life I thought I had back home. Becky, my wife, didn't just file for divorce while I was overseas. She'd already moved her new boyfriend Jeremy into our home in Spokane. She'd drained our joint bank account. She'd made a clean break without even a phone call. I sat there staring at my laptop in disbelief. Then I closed it, grabbed my towel and took a cold shower in the communal stall. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just got dressed for my shift like it was any other day in the sandbox. When I got back to my bunk that night, I replied with a single word: understood. That was it. No argument, no begging, no threats. My bunkmate Wilson noticed something was off. "You good, man?" he asked, not looking up from his book. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded, and that was the end of it. That's how it is in the military. We don't pry unless we have to. You learn to keep your head down, especially when your world's falling apart. Truth is, I wasn't blindsided. Not really. 6 months before I deployed, Becky had started changing. It was subtle at first: new clothes, late nights at the dental office, going to the gym more often, but never looking like she'd actually worked out. New friends I never met. New passwords on her phone. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped caring when I had one foot in a war zone. I could have confronted her. Could have gone through her phone, started asking questions. But that's not who I am. I grew up believing that if you have to spy on someone, the relationship's already dead. Instead, I did what any soldier trained to survive does: I adapted. I started preparing quietly. I moved our important documents, birth certificates, marriage license, the deed to the house, which thanks to the VA loan was in my name only, into a storage unit across town. I opened a separate account at another bank and started funneling a portion of my paycheck into it. Not enough for her to notice, but enough that I wouldn't be left with nothing if the bottom fell out. I even moved my grandfather's watch and my mom's silver to the same unit. Little things that meant something to me. Things I couldn't risk losing. The night I deployed, Becky hugged me at the airport like I was a coworker leaving for a conference, not her husband heading into a war zone. Her eyes were dry, detached, cold. I should have known then that she'd already made up her mind, but a part of me still hoped I was wrong. That maybe she was just going through something. That maybe when I came back we'd find a way back to each other. But I wasn't wrong. What Becky didn't know was that I'd been making quiet moves in the background, safeguarding my future, preparing for fallout. What she didn't understand was that I never start fights. But I finish them. She may have ended our marriage with an email, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And while she was playing house with some guy named Jeremy in a kitchen, I had remodeled myself halfway across the world. I was already planning my next move. Not out of anger. Not even out of heartbreak. Something colder took over, clearer. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a man on a mission. Coming home after deployment always feels strange. The air smells different, the sky looks different, even the silence feels heavier. But this time was worse. I wasn't coming home to a family. I was coming home to betrayal. When I landed in Washington, I didn't tell anyone. No post on Facebook. No call to Becky. No "honey, I'm home." I got off that C-130 in my dusty fatigues, grabbed my duffel, and disappeared like a ghost. I stayed the first few nights at a buddy's place near Tacoma. He owed me a favor from back in Ramadi, and I knew he wouldn't ask questions. I needed time to think, time to plan. My name was still on the deed. My credit was intact. Becky might have been playing house with Jeremy, but legally that house was still mine. So I drove by one night. Parked down the street. Just sat there in the dark watching the house I used to call home. There was a new car in the driveway, some beat-up Honda Civic with a bumper sticker that read, "Namaste, bro." Figures. Probably Jeremy's. The lights were on in the living room. I could see the shadows moving through the curtains, Becky laughing. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. And there he was, tall, thin, wearing a man bun and a flannel shirt, like he was auditioning for some coffeehouse open mic. I didn't feel rage, not anymore. That part of me had gone quiet. What I felt was a cold clarity, the kind you only find after months of sandstorms and firefights. This wasn't about getting even. It was about reclaiming what was mine and walking away clean. A week later, I went to the county clerk's office. Quietly filed a petition to initiate a claim on the house. See, what Becky didn't realize was that the house was purchased with my VA benefits. She never contributed a dime to the down payment. Legally, she was entitled to very little. I also froze the joint accounts she hadn't already drained and submitted a fraud claim on the withdrawals she'd made after filing the divorce while I was deployed. Then came the hard part, seeing her. I knocked on the door of my house at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. Becky opened it in a robe that I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. "Jake," she blinked like I was a ghost. "You're home?" "Yeah," I said. "Got in last week." She stepped aside, automatically letting me in without a word. The house smelled different, like incense and organic soap. There was yoga stuff piled in the corner of the living room, and the TV was paused on some reality dating show. My old recliner was gone. My grandfather's flag display case had been shoved into a box in the garage. Jeremy walked in a minute later, shirtless, holding a protein shake. "Hey man," he said like I was a neighbor asking to borrow a rake. I didn't respond. I just looked at Becky. "We need to talk." "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I thought we were done. You were gone so much, and I felt alone." That was her excuse. Loneliness. Like I hadn't been lonely too. Like I hadn't missed holidays, anniversaries, birthdays just to make sure she had a life with running water and a roof. I didn't yell. Didn't break anything. I just told her calmly that I was reclaiming the house, that I'd filed everything legally, and that she had 30 days to vacate. "You can't just do that," she snapped. I pulled out the paperwork and laid it on the counter. I already did. Jeremy stepped forward like he was going to say something, but Becky stopped him. She knew. She knew she'd underestimated me. She thought I'd come back broken. But she forgot who I was. I'd fought in places that don't even show up on Google Maps. I'd seen men bleed out in my arms. I'd built my life back from scratch before, and I could do it again. The next few weeks were awkward. I stayed close, monitored the process through my lawyer, and gave her space to pack. I didn't make a scene. I didn't post anything online. Quiet revenge is the best kind, clean, surgical, permanent. The day she finally left, she didn't say goodbye. Just drove off in that Civic with Jeremy in the passenger seat. I stood in the doorway and watched them disappear. Then I walked into my house, bare, dusty, and empty, and took a deep breath. It didn't feel like home anymore, but it was mine. The first night alone in the house was the hardest. The walls echoed. Every room felt unfamiliar, like a house staged for sale, not a place where someone had once loved, laughed, and built dreams. I sat on the floor of the empty living room, leaned against the wall where our couch used to be, and let the silence wrap around me like a heavy coat. There were no more lies, no more shadows lurking behind texts and girls' nights. But there was also no more marriage, no more companionship. Just me and a long road ahead. I didn't try to run from the pain. I let it sit with me. Nights were quiet, but not peaceful. My mind kept circling back. How did we get here? How could someone who once said, "I'll wait forever," give up in just a few months? I didn't have the answers. But I had something better now: control. For the first time in a long time, the decisions were mine again. I started with the basics. Reclaimed the garage and cleaned it out. I found old tools, forgotten gear, and some of my army journals buried in a storage bin. I read through them, page by page, entries from training letters I never sent, notes to myself during long desert nights. That version of me, the one who still believed in loyalty and service, in fighting for something bigger, he wasn't gone. Just buried. It was time to dig him out. I fixed up the place, one room at a time. I painted over the pastel walls Becky picked out, replaced the scented candles with the smell of wood and clean linen, and put my grandfather's flag case back where it belonged, front and center. Little by little, the house stopped feeling like our place and started becoming my sanctuary. But a house isn't enough to rebuild a life. So I reached out to an old army buddy, Marcus. He ran a nonprofit that helped veterans transition back into civilian life. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year, but when I called, he picked up on the second ring. "Jake, damn man, thought you fell off the planet. Yeah, I said felt like I did. We met for coffee the next day. Marcus looked older, more gray in his beard, but his voice hadn't changed. He still had that energy, that spark that made you believe the mission wasn't over just because the war was. He offered me a position part-time counseling new vets, helping them deal with the same kind of disorientation I was feeling. I didn't say yes right away. I wasn't sure if I was ready to guide anyone. Hell, I was still figuring out how to guide myself, but a week later I showed up. First, just to help out sorting gear, taking inventory. Then slowly I started sitting in on the group talks. I listened. I spoke. And one day I looked around that circle of tired eyes and realized we were all carrying the same weight, just in different ways. Some carried scars on their bodies, others like me on their hearts. One vet, Chris, broke down during a meeting. He'd lost his wife too. Only in his case she didn't leave, she overdosed. After the session we sat outside. No big talk. Just two men breathing in cold air trying to figure out what's next. I don't know how to move on, he said. I looked at him and nodded. You don't. Not really. You just move. Day by day. You make the bed. You drink the coffee. You breathe. He nodded, wiped his face, and for the first time in a long while I saw something in someone else that I had started to feel again, in myself, hope. I never expected to find healing in helping others, but maybe that's how it works. Maybe you don't fix yourself in isolation. Maybe you stitch the wounds by showing someone else how to close theirs. It's not all perfect. I still get those late-night flashes. I still sometimes wake up expecting to hear her next to me. But the grief has stopped shouting. Now it just whispers. And as the months passed, I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I started living on purpose. I joined a local boxing gym. I volunteered for Habitat for Humanity on weekends. I even adopted a dog from the shelter, a black lab mix named Diesel, who never leaves my side. Jake before the war. Jake during the war. Jake after betrayal. I don't know which version of me is the real one. Maybe all of them. Maybe none. But I do know this, I'm still standing. And for now, that's enough. Fall came early that year. The mornings turned crisp before September even ended. Leaves scattered across my front porch, golden and red like fire on the ground. Diesel, now fully part of my daily routine, barked at the wind as it swept through the trees. My house felt warmer. Lived in. Safe. But something still felt unfinished. I'd spent the past few months rebuilding everything that had been torn down: my home, my sense of purpose, my confidence. I'd poured my time into the nonprofit found community and other veterans, and even started mentoring younger guys who were just returning from overseas. It gave me structure. It gave me direction. But there was one thing I hadn't yet dealt with: Becky. Not her exactly. I didn't want to call her. I didn't want answers. I didn't even want an apology. I just wanted peace. Every time her name popped into my head, it still stirred something. Not the same kind of sharp, gut-wrenching pain it used to be. Now it was more like a dull tug, unfinished business pulling at the edge of my spirit. I hated that she still had real estate in my mind. I didn't want to carry her anymore. I didn't want resentment to follow me into every new chapter of my life. So I wrote a letter. Not to send. Just for me. Becky, I don't hate you. Not anymore. I wanted to. I thought that would make it easier. But it didn't. Holding on to hate just chained me to the version of myself you left behind. I'm done carrying that. You broke my heart, yeah. But maybe I wasn't as perfect as I thought I was either. Maybe we both failed. I just wish you would have been honest. I wish you would have respected me enough to tell the truth instead of letting me find out like that. Still, I forgive you. I forgive you because I need to. I forgive you so I can breathe again. So I can move forward without dragging your ghost through every room in my house. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. Jake. I folded the letter and tucked it inside an old journal I kept in my nightstand. I didn't need to mail it. The act of writing it was enough. I slept better that night than I had in months. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head. I stopped comparing every woman I passed on the street to her. I even started to notice other people, not in a desperate rebound kind of way, but in a curious, open way. There was one woman I met at a community build site named Elise. She was in charge of volunteer coordination, smart, no-nonsense with a sarcastic wit. and the kind of smile that showed up slow but stayed a while. We didn't talk much at first, just joked around while hauling wood and hammering beams. But one day after the project wrapped up, she asked if I wanted to grab a coffee. It wasn't a date. It didn't have to be. It was just two people sitting at a cafe on Main Street talking about music dogs, and how neither of us really liked pumpkin spice lattes. It was light. It was easy. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't weighed down by the past. I didn't tell Elise everything. Not yet. She didn't need to know all my scars in one sitting. But she listened when I talked. She laughed when I made dumb jokes. And when she leaned in to show me a video of her dog chasing a squirrel, I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I leaned in too. Healing doesn't always come in some big moment. Sometimes it sneaks up on you in quiet mornings, in shared coffee, in the decision to forgive someone who never asked for it. I still keep the letter in my nightstand, not as a reminder of Becky, but as a marker for the moment I finally let go. Because forgiveness isn't really about the other person. It's about setting yourself free from a story that no longer serves you. I'll always remember what we had. The love, the betrayal, the silence that followed. But I don't live there anymore. That chapter is closed. I live here now, in a house I built back with my own hands, surrounded by people who show up, and a dog who never judges my past. The future's still unwritten. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to turn the page. The days kept getting shorter, but I didn't mind. There was something about fall that felt right, like nature was teaching me how to let go and prepare for something new. After the letter, after the quiet coffee with Elise, life started to stretch out ahead of me like an open road. Not perfect, not without bumps, but real. Possible. Elise and I didn't rush anything. There was no pressure, no need to force what wasn't ready. We met up for coffee or a walk in the park sometimes just to talk about the small stuff: music, movies, her latest dog antics, my attempts at cooking, which mostly failed. I found myself laughing again more than I had in years. What struck me most about Elise was her patience. She didn't ask me to spill all my baggage right away or fix myself overnight. Instead, she showed up steady and real. I learned to trust that, and slowly I let her in. One afternoon, she asked me about my work with veterans. I'd been volunteering at a local center helping guys and gals who were struggling with the same ghosts I once wrestled. PTSD, addiction, homelessness, the familiar shadows that follow so many of us home. Talking about it was hard, but I realized it wasn't just a burden to carry. It was a chance to make something better from all the pain. That day, Elise watched me speak with a young vet named Marcus, a kid barely 25, who reminded me of myself at that age, lost, angry, unsure if he could survive. Marcus had been on the streets for weeks, and every night I felt the weight of his story press on me. But when I saw him crack a smile after he finally got his first hot meal, I knew that maybe my own second chance was connected to his. Helping Marcus wasn't just charity. It was healing. Every step I took with him, every small victory we shared, pulled me further away from the darkness I thought would always own me. And Elise. She didn't just support me, she joined in. She organized food drives, volunteered at the shelter, and even convinced a local artist to run free painting classes for the vets. Together, we weren't just surviving, we were building something new. One night, after a long day of meetings and planning, Elise and I sat on my porch watching the stars come out. Diesel lay at our feet, snoring softly. "You're different now," she said quietly. I smiled, but it wasn't easy to explain. "Yeah, I guess I am. I had to be. Not just because of Becky, no. That was just the start. The hardest part was forgiving myself. Letting go of the idea that I had to be perfect, that I could fix everything overnight. Life's messy. People are messy. But maybe that's okay." She nodded. "It is." That moment felt like a turning point, not just for me, but for everything I was becoming. I realized that love wasn't about never getting hurt. It was about having the courage to keep showing up, to keep trusting even when the past still whispered doubts. The work at the Veterans Center grew, and so did my role. I started leading workshops, sharing my story with groups of returning soldiers. I talked about the importance of community, of asking for help, and most importantly, of forgiveness, not just for others, but for ourselves. Every time I spoke, I felt a little lighter, a little stronger. One winter afternoon, we held a holiday event at the shelter. Marcus stood up in front of the crowd, a room full of vets, volunteers, and community members, and told his story. He talked about despair, but also about hope, about how someone cared enough to listen and how that made all the difference. As I watched him speak, I felt tears sting my eyes. This was what it meant to move forward. Not alone, but together. And then there was Elise, smiling beside me, her hand in mine. For the first time in a long time, I believed the future was bright. Not because it was perfect, but because I wasn't facing it alone. The scars from the past didn't vanish, they were a part of me. But they didn't define me anymore. I was Jake's survivor, mentor, friend, partner. I was building a life worth living brick by brick with people who mattered. Maybe forgiveness was just the beginning. Maybe healing was a lifelong journey. But I was ready to walk that path with open eyes and an open heart. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply keep going. Keep loving. Keep believing in second chances. And that's exactly what I plan to do.